We're live? Like, can they hear us? We need to work on that. Or I need to work on that. Hey, everyone, we're glad that you joined us for another episode of Let's Talk, where we discuss the things that happened in the sermon and maybe any questions that you may have. So if you have any questions at all, please feel free to share those. This is a weird setup. I'm on Jeff's side now.
Yeah, we kind of moved around. I'm still recovering from an eye surgery. I do want to thank the people who have been praying for me and some different people who have helped out with different things. I really appreciate it. And Gabe helped out in a big way. He was surprised last week. My surgery was an emergency surgery, and one of the consequences was I wasn't supposed to exert myself very much at all physically, and I wasn't supposed to read, which makes it very hard to preach or to deliver that way. So Gabe took over for me last minute, and our sermon last week was supposed to be dealing with dangerous people or people who have been hurtful to you, who have tried to hurt you, and or maybe they didn't try to, but they did hurt you, whether they were trying or not, and you kind of handled that. And I don't know, there's things I want to talk about on that topic, but I wonder if there was anything else in the sermon that you may just recap a little bit of what you were saying.
Yeah, we it was a thought, and maybe was because I didn't I shared this on Sunday, that maybe it's because I didn't really know how to accurately say, hey guys, here are 5 ways to deal with people who hurt you, when I myself am dealing with people who have hurt
Right.
me, and I guess it's not something easy to do.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Which is why you added it to the sermon series. It's something
Right.
with something we need to talk about. And I took all the morning really to talk more about how the first thing to deal with someone who hurt you has to be forgiveness. So the message actually had more to do with forgiveness, interestingly enough, than just talking about people who hurt you.
Right.
And forgiveness being the most important thing, because if we don't forgive, then everything else we do
Right.
is going to just keep happening again.
Right.
Because we still have that person and content in our heart.
And I want to talk about that just a little bit too. I will say, if you did get a chance to hear the sermon, it's worth going to YouTube or Facebook and looking at it again. One of the hard parts about what you did is talking about the real emotional hurt that does to a person. Sometimes as preachers, we can kind of stay above the fray on all that and make it all real intellectual. And the stuff that really hurts us the most, of course, is not just intellectual. It's emotional. It keeps you up at night, makes your stomach hurt. It can affect other relationships in your life. And so I'd encourage you to go listen to it again if you didn't get to hear it. But I wanted to talk about, on the heels of that, you said at the very beginning of your sermon, I was watching it, I was laying down on my left side there trying to heal my eye, and you said at the beginning of it something along the lines of, I don't think this is exactly what Jeff would have done. I don't think this is where Jeff would have taken it, or something to that effect. You remember saying that? Yeah. Okay. And, what I would have done if I had been doing it, what I would have wanted to cover was on the forgiveness issue, is make sure we're saying the same, that our words are all the same. Because sometimes how I use a word may be different than how you use a word, and I could teach something and think that I'm being very clear, but you're hearing the word different than what I intend. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit. On this word forgiveness, when we think about the word forgiveness, that just means that I have to, I've lost one of my papers. Anyway, I have to make a decision to forgive. If I'm hurt, I have to forgive. Jesus says that we're to forgive. You mentioned it in the sermon. If I have a choice to forgive or not, I got to keep doing it. And as long as the other person continues to come back, I've got to keep forgiving. Even Jesus says 70 times 7, just over and over and over and over and over again. And I think you forgive. I think the reason why Jesus pushes us to forgive over and over and over again like he does is because he knows it's good for us. When we hold it in, we hurt ourselves. It gives us an ulcer. We give ourselves migraines, and a lot of times hurt ourselves while the other person is sleeping just fine. The person who hurt us has fantastic power, and we're in our car talking to ourselves about what we should have really said, or in the shower going over it all over again. And it can bleed into other relationships. Forgiveness, and the way that I'm using that word, is just letting God take care of the avenging, committing it to God when it comes back to my mind, refusing to rehearse it again, I'm going to give it to God. I'm going to let God deal with it. I'm not going to rethink this thing, relitigate it in my head, rehearse it in my head. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to trust that God will make it right. And I think you have an obligation to do that automatically. But this word forgiveness is not the same as the word trust.
Right.
And I think sometimes we miss that in our Christian teaching. If someone steals my car, I have to forgive them because Jesus tells me I have to forgive them. And it does me no good to litigate it in my head again and again and again. That doesn't do any good. And get mad and every time I see him, my stomach hurts.
Right.
But I don't have to loan him my car the next time. And in fact, I'm allowed to put my car in a garage or get a security system around it, or even be out there to protect my car from getting stolen. I'm allowed to do all those things. And if I know who stole it, I'm allowed to call the police and tell them, hey, I think you need to get after this guy. They have my car. All those things are fine. Trust and forgiveness aren't the same deal. And we're not called to forgive and forget in Scripture. Now God does that. He puts our sins as far as east is from west, but I don't think he commands us to do that. I think he commands us to trust him for the outcomes. He commands us to lean on him for those outcomes, but we're not supposed just to trust blindly. He never calls us to do that. In fact, just the opposite. We're told to be as wise as serpents or as shrewd as serpents and I'm forgetting part of the lyric there.
Something about sheep.
Sheep, innocent as doves and shrewd as serpents. I think that's what it is. So you're allowed to be smart about things and to be protective of your heart that way. So
Well, it was that, and I shared that in the sermon too. That is what you shared with me about the whole thing with my father. It's forgiving someone doesn't mean that they earn trust automatically.
Right.
You said the example of your car, right? Stealing your car.
Right.
If someone steals my money and I know them, I'm not going to leave my wallet laying around
Right.
them for them to.
Right.
If trust is broken, I don't think it's unbiblical to think there's going to take a while for this to be built back up.
Right.
And it doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means this other person needs to also work on this. It's not just
Right.
one-sided where we have to forgive, then we build the trust and we do all the work. That person also has to try, but we confuse that, forgiveness and trust. And when we read, right, we preach and we talk about forgiveness, and when you read about forgiveness, it's not, forgiveness isn't just trust. I don't think we talk about that enough. Maybe people confuse it.
Well, I think sometimes the person, and there's another word here that's important as we're thinking about this. When we think about abuse, of course, all the rules start to change a lot at that point. If someone has criminally hurt you, and abuse, especially when we're talking about physical or sexual abuse, I mean, call the police. I think sometimes churches have gotten in trouble and, in fact, protected the abusers because we'll handle this in-house, and if you forgive them, you have to let it go. You have to trust again. And I don't think the Bible commands that. We are told to forgive freely, and I think we should, even truthfully, even in cases of abuse. I think you need to work that direction. But no one can command it of you. And at some level, forgiveness is an emotional thing, and your emotions are what your emotions are. I mean, I might tell you, you've got to let this go, and you might say back to me very honestly, but I can't. I mean, I want to too, but I can't. And it's a process. I mean, the things that really hurt you the most, the idea that you're going to stand in an empty room and say, I forgive, like as an Office episode where Michael Scott declares bankruptcy. Do you remember the episode?
Yeah.
Okay. And he stands.
Well, he doesn't say it. He declares it.
He stands in a room. I declare bankruptcy or whatever. So okay. Well, you can stand in an empty room and say you forgive someone, but it still may come back to you that night when you're by yourself, or the next time you're with the other person, or you're in a room and they're nowhere near it. It's like a Christmas get together and everybody's happy, but for some reason you're miserable, and it's all because it's all coming back to you again. Okay, so it's a process, and forgiveness may take on a deep hurt may take years to totally hand it off to God, because you still have agency. You still keep grabbing it back. I do. I mean, I assume everybody else does. You keep grabbing it back. When it's an abuse situation, when someone has done something criminal to you, you are allowed to find redress for that. And I think some of the scriptures have been misused in that regard. One of my favorite scriptures about forgiveness Jesus says, if your brother or sister sins against you, go point out their fault just between the two of you. And if they listen to you, then you've won them over. I think that's great advice, and I've said it in sermons for 90% of the problems. I think most of the problems we get into, if I hurt Gabe's feelings and Gabe comes straight to me and says, hey, listen, you hurt my feelings, you did it here and here and here. We have a conversation, just the two of us. He doesn't take anybody else. That's generally speaking the best way for it to get handled. But in cases of abuse, where the power dynamic is completely unequal, where one person is way above the other and has used their power somehow one way or another to really crunch the other person. You mentioned your dad. A parent certainly has that ability to really crunch sometimes. Sometimes a husband can do that to a wife, or a boss can do that to an employee, or sometimes if I have more wealth or more influence or more whatever in our situation, I can really put the weight down. Take a biblical example. Joseph, Potiphar's wife, tries to seduce Joseph, and Joseph's a slave, and she tries to seduce him, and he runs for his life. It would be stupid in that situation for him to stay there and just go to her, just the two of them, and work that out. That'd be crazy. She has all the power in the world. She has all the strength in the world. She's taken advantage of him, or trying to, for him to stay there and just try to negotiate that. Well, that'd be nuts. And so that verse, Matthew 18:15, which is such a great verse, solves 90% of the problems. There are some problems that it doesn't totally address, and I don't think it even necessarily intends to address. Right. I mean, if it's an abuse situation, it might not be safe for you to go to the other person, just the two of you, and have that conversation. It might not, certainly if they've abused you, it wouldn't be safe. Sometimes it wouldn't be smart because you're so unstable for whatever's going on that it wouldn't even be smart for you to go back and try to negotiate it. Sometimes going to that person privately, they are so strong over you and so persuasive, they'll talk you out of following up on it, but you're still going to feel the same way you feel. I mean, nothing's been resolved. They just put their thumb on you and got you to give in. Mm-hmm. So like I said, I think sometimes verses like that are misused and misplaced, and I don't think God expects that we just are going to cave in on every last stupid thing. I know I'm ranting, but I think it gets misunderstood.
Right.
And I what I tried to say about your, and I don't know how far you want to get into this on camera, of course, but and we can stop even if I get into it. Say, no, I don't want to get into that. Then okay. But what I was telling you with the complicated relationship there, I mean, I think you have to forgive the other person. You have no choice about that. And I think it's healthy for all of us to have as many friends as we can. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a healthy amount. I want as many as I can get. So if you could repair that relationship, if it can be repaired, if the other person makes the adjustments they need to make, if the other person works at the reconciliation too, it's not just you. I mean, the more friends you have, the better. Right. And if in 10 years everything is 100% better, great. But you don't have to you can't microwave it. And you don't have to say, okay, we'll just pretend like that's all in the past now, and you can come to every Christmas we get together, and we'll just meet every week for 2 or 3 hours. I mean, it takes time.
You said the word if you could, right? And it reminded me of Romans 12:18, to do all that you can to live in peace with everyone.
Right.
And a lot of what I was talking about on Sunday was probably on that, and I should have brought up that verse of the Bible tells us that with as much as we can help it, try to live peaceably. And I think we just see a difficult situation and we think it's going to be too hard. This person's not going to get it. There's no way. They're going to mess up again. So we don't even try.
Right.
And that's where I see the problem, is that we are told to try as best as we can, as much as you possibly can, live with peace, live at peace with all men. And that's where I convicted myself, because I wasn't trying.
Right.
And I was we put it on the other person. Well, if they really want to try, they really want to fix this relationship, they have to do it. They have to try. But no, the Bible's telling us we're the ones who have to try.
Right.
We try to live at peace. Now, maybe peace is distance.
Right.
Maybe if you yell at your brother or dad or whatever every Thanksgiving, then maybe don't go to Thanksgiving.
And sometimes, but I think you right, and there's no but. 100% right. I mean, I think that's true. where you have to be honest is acknowledge that part of the reason why you can't do it is your own weakness. I mean, if I was a stronger person, maybe I could, but you are who you are, and the other person is who they are. I mean, every time we get together, it's oil and water. And there is a point. Titus 3 has a verse where it says, "You warn a divisive person once, and then twice, then have nothing to do with them." There is a point where you can say, I tried. I mean, I did. We got together. I did the best I could. But don't forget all the other things we said. I mean, forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. Forgiveness is allowing God into the relationship, allowing God to get even if somebody's going to get even. It's not trusting your heart to them again. You're not called to do that. If someone has taken advantage and been cruel or abusive, you are allowed legal ramifications for that. You're allowed to call the authorities.
Right.
And you're allowed to create some space. And everything we're talking about, one thing that's hard about this particular lesson is I promise that there might be somebody, well, I'm just almost sure, there'll be somebody listening who'll say, well, what you're saying makes sense, but in my specific situation, it doesn't exactly fit, and it may not. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's very hard to make one blanket paintbrush deal that's going to cover every possible wrinkle in this thing. It's more about the big principles. In the big principles, we forgive because we're all sinners. Christ forgave us when he shouldn't have. I mean, as far as like what makes sense, we weren't a good risk. You know, a bank will make a loan to somebody who they feel like is a good risk to pay back. We were not a good risk. And he didn't just loan us something, he gave us his very life. And so because Christ was that generous to us, we should be characterized by a generosity of spirit. And that's what forgiveness is. The end. That's the whole story. However, we are not called to just blanket trust people, especially people who have proven to be untrustworthy. We're allowed to take our time and trust a little more and trust a little more and see how that goes. And if the other person breaks trust, to back off a step or two. We're even allowed, if someone has broken trust enough and in enough different ways, to say, I'm not sure I can do this anymore. And we see examples. Titus 3 is the clearest example, but there are other examples in Scripture where it seems like eventually you just move on. I mean, even with Paul and Barnabas, there's an argument they have in Acts chapter 15. These are both great guys. Neither guy is necessarily abusive or mean, but they just can't work together any longer. And they both go their own ways, and the Bible doesn't really condemn it. It's just a sad part of being human for you and for the other person. And so I know we're hitting a lot of things at the same time, but hopefully I'm just doing this one-eyed, so I don't know if it's making sense.
No,
100%.
It is, and I mean we're on time now, or close to time, but obviously this isn't a thing that can be solved in
Right.
an episode thing. This is a conversation that we hope can help you and challenge you to have that conversation, to think about it yourself, to talk with people you know and trust, and try to find an answer. I know that I got to the point I am today where I can talk about these things because I've had people in the last year that have helped me process all these things. And if I didn't have that, then I wouldn't be able to talk about it.
Right.
So maybe you need that too.
Right.
You need people around you that you can talk about these things with that will finally help you find where you are, find healing, put your trust in God, learn to forgive, and hopefully, I mean, the goal is to earn that trust back, if possible, with that other person. I mean, we're told to live with peace, but even there, it doesn't mean that they have to be our best friends. It's just we live with peace as best as we can. So the challenge is, are you doing that? Are you trying as best as you can to live with peace, or are we just kind of, seeing how it goes and not really preparing and setting ourselves up for...
And you take the burden of it. I mean, you take the burden of it, and don't let someone else put the burden on you, and don't let someone amplify the burden. If I have hurt Gabe's feelings, I've done something to hurt his feelings, and he tells me that, we have our meeting one-on-one, and he tells me, hey, you did this, and this really hurt, and I say, I'm sorry, and Gabe says, well, it's going to take me a few weeks to trust you again. I can't then say, well, I said I'm sorry, so just get over it. I mean, I can't make you do it. No one can make you do it. In that scenario, he should take the burden for change, but it really has to kind of be at his pace. I mean, the hurt was a real thing. That what was done was a real thing, and I don't think I've hurt you. We're talking metaphorically here, but you've got to. But it's up to you, and I can't demand it, and I can't tell you, well, just get over it, because that's not how life works. And that can be real hard if you've been the one who's hurt someone else. If you're the kind of person who maybe has thrown your elbows around a little bit and you've hurt somebody. I mean, you may have to be patient, and especially if you've goofed up on something that is important. You know, you've wrecked a marriage, or you've sabotaged a relationship with a kid. You know, something that really, really matters. There's going to be every part of you that's crying out, can't we just put this behind us? Because you are hungry to put it behind you. But you've got to be patient for the other person. They're the one who bore the weight of it. And I have great sympathy if you're somebody watching today and you're on the other side where you were the one who did the bad thing. You know, you drank too much, or you cheated too much, or you lied too much, and now there's a break. And you want the other person to get over it, and it's taken longer. Man, be patient. That same burden for you. If it's possible, you live at peace. Give the other person space. Continue to show that you've changed. Continue to make work to change. And generally speaking, I think God will work that out.
Yeah. I think it'd be interesting at some point to talk about the other person's perspective, about how and why those people hurt others.
Right.
And even the thought of how we've been hurt is how we end up hurting people.
Exactly right.
Even though we're the ones trying to find forgiveness and
Right.
forgive people, we still hurt people.
Right.
You know, we're not perfect. And I thought that was interesting when you said, you know, the word, can't you just get over? So many times I feel like I think that about people, but it's like, not just because I received those conversations
Right.
doesn't mean that others deserve those as well. So I think that'd be an interesting conversation for another time. And I wanted to point out, you said earlier, you know, about people drinking too much or cheating too much. There is such a thing as drinking too much. Cheating is
Cheating is
you
pretty
know,
much bad
even from the first
even
time.
From the first time.
There's
right.
no too much. Like, there's an acceptable amount.
Right,
Just
right.
throwing that out there.
No, you're right.
Someone out there might have been like, oh, so there's a limit. Or
No, really, it's all bad. Right.
Well, we hope, again, that this conversation really did help and encourage you. If you have any questions or you want to talk about this or any situation, something you're going through, if you need prayer, you can call us, message us to the church. However you can get a hold of us, we would love to talk to you if you have any questions or need anything. We're here for you, and we do this to let you know that we want to talk about these things, the things that, you know, that trouble all of us, and we want to have those conversations. So if you need to talk to us, we're here for you. If we don't, no, I'm going to leave that thought.
That's good.
Another thought.
Okay.
So that's all we got for this week. Thank you.